November 2003. A staging area at Camp Udari, Kuwait. A convoy of armoured vehicles rolls north toward Iraq. Not tanks. Not the steel-tracked Bradleys that defined 2 generations of American armoured warfare. These are wheeled. 8 wheels. Each one a rubber tyre pressing softly against the sand. No clanking. No grinding. No roar of steel on steel. The vehicle looks wrong. It looks like something a police department might order. Not the United States Army. Soldiers from other units watched it roll past and called it a truck. Some called it a coffin. Defense analysts published reports calling it a rolling death trap. Critics in Congress said it would be destroyed the moment it entered a real fight. One retired colonel who had smashed 70 Iraqi armoured vehicles in a single 23-minute engagement called wheels on a combat vehicle a fundamental doctrinal error. Within 12 months, those same vehicles would absorb 91 rocket-propelled grenade attacks in one of the most dangerous cities in Iraq. Not one soldier would be killed by a single one of those rockets. Commanders who had never wanted the thing would tell Congress it had saved at least 100 lives. The United States Army, the most track-obsessed ground force in the Western world, would order more of them. Its designation was the M1126 Stryker Infantry Carrier Vehicle, and it was the most controversial armoured vehicle the United States had built since the Second World War. To understand why the Stryker existed, you need to understand the problem the United States Army faced in the late 1990s. The Army had 2 kinds of forces, and both were wrong for what the world was becoming. Its heavy forces, built around the 70-ton M1 Abrams and the 33-ton Bradley fighting vehicle, were lethal and nearly unstoppable. They were also so heavy that deploying them anywhere took weeks of strategic sea lift. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, the Army airlifted paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne as an immediate response. Those soldiers dug into the Saudi desert with almost no anti-tank capability, while the Army spent 6 months shipping its heavy armour by sea. As General Eric Shinseki later recalled, for reasons that were never fully explained, Saddam stopped. The Army held its breath. The lesson was stark. Heavy was lethal, but slow. Light was fast, but fragile. Then came Kosovo in 1999. NATO ordered a ground task force into Albania to support air operations. 24 Apache helicopters, heavy artillery, over 5,000 troops. The Albanian airfield could barely absorb the traffic. Equipment bogged down in the mud. The deployment cost $254 million. The Apaches never flew a single combat sortie. The entire operation produced 0 combat results. That same year, General Eric Shinseki became the 34th Chief of Staff of the Army, the first Asian American 4-star general in United States military history. He was an armor officer. He had helped field M1 Abrams tanks in the 1980s. He had lost part of a foot to a landmine in Vietnam and spent nearly a year recovering before returning to active duty. He was not an outsider with ideas. He was the institution itself, and he had decided the institution was wrong. At the Association of the United States Army meeting in October 1999, Shinseki announced his vision: a brigade deployable anywhere in the world in 96 hours, a division in 120 hours, medium-weight forces that could get there fast and still fight when they arrived. The vehicle he wanted did not yet exist. The Army would buy the best option on the market and field it while a future system was developed. The contract was awarded in November 2000 to General Dynamics Land Systems and General Motors Defense. The vehicle they proposed was a heavily modified version of the Canadian LAV III, an 8x8 wheeled armoured carrier already proven in Canadian service. The Army would call it the Stryker, named for 2 American soldiers who had each thrown themselves into death to save their comrades. Private First Class Stuart Stryker had charged a fortified German building alone near Wessel in March 1945, drawing enemy fire so his platoon could surround it, capturing over 200 German soldiers. He was killed at age 20. Specialist 4 Robert Stryker had thrown himself across a Claymore mine in Vietnam in November 1967, absorbing the blast with his body and saving at least 6 men. He died 2 days before his 23rd birthday. The 2 men were not related. The vehicle was their name, and it had better be worthy of it. The M1126 as delivered weighed approximately 40,800 pounds, carried 2 crew and 9 fully equipped infantry soldiers, and was powered by a Caterpillar C7 diesel engine producing 350 horsepower. Its top speed reached 62 miles per hour on road. Its range was over 310 miles on a single tank. The engine and transmission could be removed and reinstalled in roughly 2 hours, a maintenance advantage over tracked vehicles that would matter enormously in the desert. The armament was a Kongsberg Protector remote weapon station, a Norwegian-designed system that mounted a .50 caliber heavy machine gun, controlled entirely from inside the vehicle. The gunner never had to expose himself to operate it. No hatch open. No head above the armour. In the narrow streets and ambush corridors of an urban insurgency, That would matter enormously. The base armor stopped 14.5mm armor-piercing rounds and artillery fragmentation. It would not stop a rocket-propelled grenade. That limitation became the central argument of every critic the vehicle had. Before the first Strykers crossed into Iraq, General Dynamics engineers developed a solution. Welded steel bars, spaced 2.5 inches apart, suspended 10 inches from the vehicle surface on a cage-like framework. The slat armor detonated an incoming RPG warhead before it could form its penetrating jet. It added 5,000 pounds to the vehicle and made it look, in the words of the soldiers who rode it, like a rolling birdcage. But its effectiveness in testing was extraordinary, and no one in Mosul was going to care how it looked. The vehicle also carried a digital networking system called FBCB2 that shared position data, enemy contacts and intelligence across the entire formation. In the chaos of urban combat, where the deadliest mistakes are fratricide and the failure to mass at the decisive point, this system would give Stryker units an awareness their opponents could not match. Now, before we get into the combat record and what happened when the critics finally faced the evidence, if you are finding this deep dive into modern military history worthwhile, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, and it keeps this channel running. November 2003. The 3rd Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division, 4,800 soldiers and 311 Stryker vehicles, arrived in northern Iraq and took control of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. With a population of nearly 2 million people, the brigade was replacing the 101st Airborne Division, which had deployed approximately 25,000 troops to hold the same ground. The skeptics watching from Washington said it was impossible. The Strykers' advantages revealed themselves almost immediately. Mosul sprawls across a wide area of northern Iraq, a city of dense neighborhoods connected by long arterial roads. The Stryker could cover that ground at combat speed, arriving at incidents within minutes. The Bradley, by comparison, was slower on road, tore up paved surfaces with its steel tracks, and its clanking approach announced itself to every neighborhood it entered long before it arrived. The Stryker moved quietly. Soldiers began reporting that Iraqi civilians were calling the unit's soldiers ghost soldiers because they seemed to arrive from nowhere in the dark. The first critical test came not from combat but from logistics and intelligence. The FBCB2 network allowed company commanders to share contacts and assessments in real time across the entire battle space, compressing the speed of command from the 24 hours typical of conventional units to approximately 3 hours, according to later analysis by the RAND Corporation. Then came November 2004. Insurgents launched a coordinated offensive across Mosul, timed to coincide with the Second Battle of Fallujah. The city began to fall. The 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division, which had replaced the 3rd Brigade, now held Mosul with roughly the same force. On November 8th, Bravo Company of the 1st Battalion, 24th Infantry Regiment took 9 casualties in a single engagement at Yarmouk Traffic Circle, with 2 of their 4 Strykers disabled by fire. Within days, insurgents controlled 2/3 of the city. What followed was one of the hardest weeks of urban combat American forces had seen since Fallujah itself. Colonel James Kaufman, an advisor to Iraqi forces, earned the Distinguished Service Cross after moving with an Iraqi Commando Quick Reaction Force to a surrounded police station and holding it for 4 hours after nearly every Iraqi officer was killed or wounded, directing airstrikes and refusing evacuation until every casualty was extracted. 12 Iraqi commandos were killed, 42 were wounded. An estimated 600 insurgents died in and around Mosul during those 2 weeks. The Strykers held the city. The slat armor worked. By the end of the 1st Brigade's deployment, those vehicles had been struck by more than 250 rocket-propelled grenades, including more than 70 direct hits. Not one penetrated a vehicle. 5 soldiers were killed riding in Strykers during that rotation. All 5 were struck by fire while exposed through hatches, not by rocket attacks on the vehicle itself. Colonel Robert Brown, commanding the brigade, told investigators bluntly that at least 100 soldiers were alive because they had ridden in Strykers instead of unarmoured vehicles. The vehicle's most severe test came in Afghanistan. The 5th Stryker Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division, deploying to Kandahar province in summer 2009, encountered a threat the flat hull of the Stryker had never been designed to defeat. Afghan insurgents buried improvised explosive devices of massively greater size than anything encountered in Iraq, sometimes reaching estimated weights of over 1,000 pounds. The lush terrain of the Arghandab River Valley, a maze of mud walls, grape rows and irrigation ditches, negated the Stryker's speed advantage entirely. On October 27, 2009, a full squad from the 1st Battalion, 17th Infantry was killed when their vehicle drove over an enormous device buried in the riverbank near the village of Chahar Bagh. 7 soldiers and their Afghan interpreter died. It was the worst single incident in Stryker history. The brigade paid 37 soldiers killed and 238 wounded over the course of the deployment. The army responded not by abandoning the vehicle, but by redesigning it. Engineers developed a double V hull, a dual V-shaped lower structure that deflected blast energy away from the crew cabin rather than channeling it upward. The redesign added energy-attenuating seats and a reinforced suspension. Testing included 18 full explosive events against the new hull. The results were measurable. Soldiers who survived IED strikes in the double V-hull vehicles were returning to duty. The Army ordered the conversion of the fleet. On paper, the M2 Bradley had always looked superior. Its 25mm autocannon outranged the Stryker's machine gun by a significant margin. Its armour could absorb hits the Stryker could not. In a conventional force-on-force engagement, the Bradley was more lethal, but the Bradley was 11.8 feet wide against the Stryker's 8.9. It was louder on every surface it crossed. It carried 6 dismounts instead of 9. And it required a specialist crew to maintain its track system in the sand and heat of Iraq. The Stryker's engine could be swapped in a field in 2 hours. The Bradley's mechanical demands could strand a vehicle for days. What the Army built to last a decade produced a generation of soldiers who refused to give it up. November 2003. A convoy of rubber-tired vehicles rolls north from Kuwait toward a city of 2 million people, carrying 4,800 soldiers into a fight. The institution that built them believed they could not survive. The Stryker had real limitations. Its original flat hull was vulnerable to underbody blast. Its C-130 transport claim turned out to be largely fictional under operational conditions. Its .50 caliber main armament was outgunned by the 25mm cannons, carried by the vehicles it was supposed to replace. Critics who raised those concerns were not wrong, and yet it worked. In the streets of Mosul, in the grinding urban campaign through Bakuba, in the earliest night raids of the Surge, when speed and silence reached a target before the target knew it was being approached. In the double V hull on roads outside Kandahar after the Army accepted the lesson and fixed the design. In the hands of Ukrainian crews who drove American Strykers into Russian-occupied territory in 2023. Nearly 4,900 vehicles produced, 7 brigade combat teams still equipped. Production contracts running into the 1930s. The Army that once called it a truck is still buying it. That is not institutional inertia. That is what it looks like when a machine earns what it was named for.